Welcome back here to X's and Bros on the Michigan Sports Network. Danny Cahill, Ryan Elke, Anthony Bellino, all joining you. Join us now covering the Detroit Lions for the Pride of Detroit. One of, if not the premier source for Detroit Lions news and information. Visit prideofdetroit.com. His name is Jeremy Reisman. Find him on Twitter at DetroitOnLion. Lost a check mark. He's still verified. I don't know. Is this a real account, parody account? Jeremy, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Yeah, I'm not sure myself anymore who I am, but appreciate you having me, Anthony.
Well, with an identity crisis here, this is good. I'm glad we can work through all of these things. You know, the last, couple weeks, each day we typically do a Lions segment. It's on the draft. We're throwing darts at the board because we have no idea who they're going to choose. And it's like, okay, we're finally into draft week. Man, this is the week we'll really get cooking. And then all of a sudden last week, it was this there were rumblings on the internet. Would Jameson Williams, would he be at the facility for their, non-mandatory camp? And all of these people were speculating on the internet, if he's not there, should they worry? And what about these tweets that he liked about Lamar Jackson playing quarterback and all these random things? So I go on the defense last week of Jameson, and I say, look, don't worry about the tweets. He's a kid. Of course he's going to like tweets. Don't worry if he's not there. Well, it turns out he would be there, and we'll get to that momentarily. If he's not there, don't worry about it. I'm sure he's working out doing something. And then the news bomb drops that he is now suspended for the first 6 games of the season. So I feel like an idiot because I was trying to stand up for him, but now I don't know what to think after this.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of in the same boat. I felt like Lions fans were nitpicking a little bit at his character, at his personality. Maybe they didn't like that. He's not Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? There's not pictures of him, working out and being crazy and just like being so into work. That's okay. There's not a lot of guys wired like Amon-Ra St. Brown. But there were certainly, I would say, red flags that maybe he was immature. And listen, again, it's fine. You can be immature at 22 and still be a really good football player and not have any concerns about, when you walk through those doors, you're all about football. And to be quite honest, I still feel that way about Jameson. I do. I still feel like once he gets everything else in order, he loves the game of football. He's a hard worker by everyone's admission. It's just he has a little bit of immaturity about him, and I didn't think that would necessarily hurt him, but he found a way in which it would hurt the team. And whether it's immaturity or whether it's confusing NFL rules or whatever, the fact of the matter is he made a mistake that's going to hurt this football team. And I'm not necessarily worried in the long term, but you have to certainly wonder now, is he going to respond to this news the right way? Is he going to take this as a reality check of, listen, I gotta make sure I cross all my T's, dot all my I's, make sure I know every NFL policy back to front, and make sure I don't screw up this opportunity that I have, because we're going to be a year and a half into J-Mo's NFL career with nothing to show for it. So it's time for him to really hunker down and move on from this in the right way.
He was one of 4 Detroit Lions that on Friday, when the news came out that they were suspended because of gambling. And C.J. Moore and the safety, wide receiver Quintez Cephas, indefinite suspensions. They're gone, cut immediately because they gambled on NFL games, which I find is very weird that this news is just now coming out, considering we haven't seen an NFL game in God knows how long. And now There is the Jameson Williams and Stanley Berryhill were given 6-game suspensions for gambling on non-NFL games. Let's go to first, like, what do we know, if anything, actually happened? Like, what is this suspension? Why is this happening?
Yeah, I mean, really, we don't know the full details of what Jameson and Stanley Berryhill did, but the bylaws. If you look at the bylaws of what's allowed and what's not allowed with players and gambling, if you are allowed to bet on non-NFL games if you are a player, but you have to be off NFL premises, and that can mean the practice field, it could mean the practice facility, it could mean the team bus, it could mean when you're on the road in the team hotel. All those things are considered on the job at the facility. And so that's what both Jameson and Stanley Berryhill are guilty of. And you can argue that it's not that big of a deal, which I would tend to agree with. If you can do it from your home and you're not necessarily like, it's not like they're in the middle of a meeting doing it. It's not like they're doing it in the middle of work. You could be laying down in bed at 11 o'clock watching a college football game. on the road, and that's still not allowed. And so, again, I don't know specifically. We don't know the specifics of what those two do. Chances. I mean, there's also a chance that they did it in the locker room, and that would be less acceptable. But either way, the rules are pretty strict there. If you're not at home off of work, you simply cannot bet on sports.
And I never really understood when gambling became legal, right, in most states, and obviously it is here in Michigan, and to our listeners down in Ohio, they're getting hip to it. It's really a strange space that we're in, because this is, I mean, Pandora's box was opened in all these different states with all these different regulations, and there wasn't like a federal rule that was instituted, so everybody's just kind of operating on their own, which people need to pay attention to that as well. But for me, it felt like the safe thing to do was that if you were going to be a professional athlete from a league-wide standpoint, this would go to all the four major sports. No gambling at all. You don't need to have it.
Right.
It's all it's going to do is draw unnecessary attention and probably cost you unnecessary money in the long run. So why not just have a blanket rule that says, hey, you're not allowed to gamble on sports. Flat out, point blank period, and be done, instead of these little loopholes. Well, you can bet on anything you want, just not NFL games, and not on the premises of NFL, like, quote unquote, property, if you will. Like, for me, just make one blanket rule and make it easy for everybody to understand.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat there. It's either all or nothing kind of for me. Is either everything but betting on NFL games is allowed. Obviously, you don't want that to be allowed no matter what, or nothing's allowed. It's the simplest way for players to understand the rule, the simplest way to enforce rules from your part. You don't have to geolocate where everyone is making their NFL bets to make sure everyone's doing it right. And yeah, you avoid any sort of this unnecessary talks about, whether the players are whether they're betting on games that they should or shouldn't. And it's probably not a good look no matter what, if the players are gambling in general, even though obviously the league is, in bed, so to speak, with gambling companies left and right. But yeah, I think in order to make this very simple and very easy for both the players and the public to consume this, just make it so you can't do it. You can't do it. It like you said, the players don't need to do it. It's an entertainment thing, probably for most of them, but they can get by with not having to do it at all. And that probably should have been the policy from the get-go. Would have been easiest, and it would have avoided little messes like this, where, in my opinion, the punishment doesn't necessarily meet the crime here.
And you would have thought with Calvin Ridley, like, everybody would have been like, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this. Like, hey, let's just take a look at one guy here who's now lost, over a year of football. And you already mentioned with Jameson Williams, the injury, bringing him along slowly, and now 6 games here. Hey, look, like you said, year and a half, we don't really have a whole lot to show for a guy that our general manager, Brad Holmes, moved up in the draft for in order to select. I'm not gonna cast a shadow or throw a stone at Brad Holmes, because I mean, how does, like, the kid's got to be smarter than this at this point. But does it change at all the outlook for this upcoming draft now that they know that Jameson's not going to be available for 6 weeks? As I was at work Friday, that's the one question I got. Like, oh, are they going to go for wide receiver in the first round? I'm like, I wouldn't allow this to change my draft board. I'm sorry.
Right, and I think I'm along the same route. Now, I'm not. I think it's still possible to go wide receiver in the first round, but I also think that was probably on the table before this. You look at their depth chart. Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones, all those guys, their contract is up at the end of this year. So you really only have Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tom Kennedy, and Maurice Alexander. Those are your 4 guys that are signed into 2024. So it's still a long-term need. And, the problem with me and whether I think they're going to draft one early is that I don't think it's the best draft class to do that. We've had a lot of really, really good draft classes of wide receivers. I don't think this is it. So I think the Lions probably do end up drafting one on draft night, and I'm sure the analysts will be all over. Well, is this a response to the Jameson Williams news? No, I think this is just a long-term need that they have anyways. So I would expect probably maybe day 2, maybe early day 3, but I think that was always kind of in the plans for this team, given where their long-term needs are.
Jeremy Reisman joining us right now from the Pride of Detroit. Visit prideofdetroit.com. What do you think the response in that locker room is going to be? Because I feel like, when this news comes down, I don't know exactly how the process works, but I would assume that the NFL contacts the team, or do they contact the player's agent, maybe the player directly? I don't know. But however it comes through, I would imagine there's going to be a conversation with Dan Campbell damn near immediately on Friday,
Yeah.
and then Brad Holmes as well. So it's like you're going from one office, then hit the elevator, go up to the 15th floor, and then go see the big
Right.
guy, and then who knows? Maybe a meeting with Sheila Ford Hamp as well to kind of hammer home this point in this message, whatever that may be, to Jameson Williams.
Yeah, and I would hope they're relaying that message to everybody. Like, I hope there is a league wide, a team wide. I mean, franchise wide, right? Because this wasn't even just the players. There was 4 or 5, team employees that were fired because they violated NFL gambling restrictions, which are actually a lot stricter for non-players. But yeah, I mean, this has to be used as a teaching lesson for everyone, not just Jameson Williams, because look how quickly the narrative around this team changed. And, there's still very high expectations of this team. I don't think Jameson missing 6 games suddenly means this team can't make the playoffs, can't win the division. But if it happens with another player, if it happens with another couple players, anytime down the road, like that has a chance to really, really hurt your season. And so I think that the Lions would be smart to use this as a learning experience for everybody. I think the Lions would be smart to make sure that Jameson is made an example of, like, and considering where this franchise is now, right? Like they are viewing themselves and they're being humble about it, but they're viewing themselves as legit contenders. And this just does not happen to a legit team, to a legit franchise. So if you want to be this team that truly has turned the corner here in Detroit and put all of the negativity behind it, like, you have to make sure the buck stops here. And that never happens again with JMO. It never happens with anyone else in that locker room. And you have to imagine it. Most people would see this as a pretty big wake up sign, because it's a huge punishment, right? And so, especially if you look at the guys that are indefinitely suspended, DJ Moore's career might be over. I would imagine Quintus Cephas's career is probably over in the NFL. That's how serious one mistake could be. And maybe no one got hurt. Maybe it's not some of the other things that more, that warrant bigger suspensions and domestic violence, all those sort of like big term issues that have a true victim in them. Maybe it doesn't seem that serious to them, but is quite serious to the NFL. And so, again, I hope that the Lions really take this as a teaching moment for everyone inside that building.
And they've really been like, darlings, if you will, from the national media perspective. Like, I don't know if I have lived in an era where this many people felt this good about this organization, whether it's ESPN, NFL Network, Fox Sports, wherever you're consuming information from. It's like people that actually cover the league. I'm not talking about rival fans like the Chicago Bears fans that are losing their minds on Twitter over David Montgomery. But what I'm talking about is when you flip on Good Morning Football, and they talk about the Lions, people really believe in Dan Campbell. They believe in what they saw in that 8-2 finish last season. And when it was brought to my attention, once again at work Friday, I had one younger employee who was losing his mind over it, and I said, well, here we go. This is our first test under this regime of something off the field that people are going to be, how do I say this? People are going to look at as a negative for this organization. And how the front office, the coaching staff, and the players handle this is going to tell you a lot on how they can kind of withstand, if you will, put a little Teflon on and kind of take some of this, absorb it, and then keep moving forward and have it not really damage the overall image of the franchise.
Yeah, and they have a great opportunity this Thursday, right? You get 2 first-round picks to kind of turn the page immediately here, at least when it comes to kind of like a PR level. Like, Lions nail this first round or get 2 exciting players in the first round, people are going to forget about that pretty quickly. It's a nice distraction to have, but that doesn't mean you have to like put it in the past and ignore that it happened. Like you said, the Lions have to show that they can jump back from this adversity and learn from it. So it'll be nice to talk about something else, because I feel like there's now a dark cloud over this franchise again, and the same old Lions fans are already coming out and saying, well, here we go. We knew it was too good to be true. But if you go him out and nail the draft like Brad Holmes has done mostly through his first 2 years here, that can be ignored, or at least put to the side for a little bit, while we kind of focus on this team building what looks to be a really good roster.
And last one here for you, Jeremy, the salary implications of this. If he's suspended 6 games, how does that work? Do the Lions not have to pay him for those 6 games? Where does that money go? Like, what happens then?
Yeah, that's really the simplest way to put it. Is the money that he would have earned in those games of salary? You take 6 weeks out of 18 or 17 out of his salary. The other notable thing is that he basically loses the guarantee of his future salary. So the salaries are still there on the books, but if the Lions decide to part ways, they are no longer on the hook for some of those guaranteed salaries. So in other words, it becomes a little bit easier to cut him if things don't work out. But he would still, if he's on the Lions roster for essentially the rest of his rookie deal, it would still cost the same as it does now, outside of the 6 games that he'll lose in salary. But losing that guaranteed salary, I mean, it should put more pressure on Jameson's shoulders, saying like, hey, you got to turn this around because now we have an out. And the Lions have showed, like, listen, if things aren't working out, we're going to cut bait. We're not going to sit around and wait for you to get your act together. So I think in a way that's almost a positive on the Lions side. Is like, okay, your salary is not guaranteed in the future now, which means your spot on this roster is not guaranteed. Show us that you belong here.
Wow, I'm telling you what. And if you were waiting on that paycheck to come in, and you got to miss 6 of those in a row, my friend, if that doesn't wake you up, I don't know what does. So where does that money go then?
I mean, essentially, I guess goes back to the Lions salary cap. You didn't pay it out, so it doesn't hit against your cap. I don't believe it, since it's not a fine. Like, fines usually go to NFL charities, but this isn't technically a fine. This is just losing your salary, so it just goes back into the Lions salary cap.
See, there we go. Hey, you know what that sounds like? Sounds like a raise for the rest of us, Jeremy. That's what that looks like. Write those checks, man. I'm waiting for that game check. Thank you, J-Mo, and thank you, Jeremy Reisman. Find him on Twitter at Detroit Online. Find his work, Pride of Detroit. It's draft season. You should be on that website every day of the week anyways if you're a Lions fan. Jeremy, my friend, is always partner. Thank you so much for your time today, my man. We greatly appreciate you.
Hey, I appreciate you, Anthony. Thanks for having me.